Oh, so lots been going on. Um, let's let's jump straight into it. So at the moment there is I wouldn't call it a war, but it's nearly a war going on between Facebook and Apple. Now, for those people that haven't been following this, basically what's happened is Apple is very much trying to push its notion of customer privacy and of promoting a more secure kind of data control, well, not data control really, but data safe environment, where essentially it wants to um, have the data that people are inputting into its devices. They want for their users to know where that data is going and how data is being used. Now, Facebook, on the other hand, has a business model that kind of relies on being able to track you across the internet. A lot of what I've spoken about on this channel particularly involves how Facebook does that, how Facebook, for example, uses the Facebook pixel, which we'll go into. I think we would go into a little bit, the kind of the indicators that it uses to denote whether or not you're interested in something, and how it kind of collates all that information and then builds out what they refer to as an avatar, essentially, as a kind of a digital presence of you, a digital version of you, that they can then map products to and sell products to increase product sales for the people that are advertising through its service. So on the business model side of Facebook, it kind of relies heavily on being able to track you and follow you in a micro data way, encapsulating kind of micro points of data, your view length of particular individual videos and so on and so forth. All of that data collection, Apple wants to let you know that it's going on, and they want you to essentially consent in a really open way, in a way that's far beyond the current consent given. Because most people, generally speaking, trail to the end of the terms and conditions, click accept, and that's it. So this battle between business requirements, the sort of the business functions of Facebook, and the privacy functions of Apple are coming to a collision. Now, who's right? It's a really tough one to say. On the one side, I completely understand this notion that we need to maintain consentful use of data. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. There are clear points on that. And not just in terms of, customer data around interest, but specifically things like location data, specifically things like names, contact details. There's real reasons behind this, right? In terms of safeguarding, in terms of young children, in terms of vulnerable adults, in terms of going to the extreme lengths, witness protection, that kind of thing. There are real reasons where it becomes important and imperative that people's data is safe and people's data is really only given out in particular points and only moved in such a way that the people who are accessing it are the right people, basically. So that side is really important. On the other side, though, you do run into a point about usability, which is if I want to access my bank, for example, my online banking, at the moment it is an absolute pain. I think anyone in Europe will be able to admit this, that it is a real pain to have to do some pretty strange two-factor authorizations, or sometimes 3 or 4-factor authorizations, where I'm having to give over a password, the answer to a secret question, random digits within a pin of numbers, and then I have to confirm it on the app on my phone, and then I have to confirm the number that's shown on the screen on the app on my phone with my computer. I mean, it becomes a bit ridiculous. And it really affects my usability. I just end up going, no, I can't bother. I don't care. I just go off of it. Or even worse, I do something wrong and I get locked out of it. So there is a point where usability gets massively impacted by a constant requirement of consent and a constant requirement of authorization. Now, admittedly, when it comes to banking, when it comes to logging into particular apps and those kinds of things, we are talking about security as opposed to data. But essentially, the security is there to keep your data safe. So there is a real connection here. And what Apple seems to be doing is wanting to add a layer of authorization between me being able to access the download of Facebook. So this isn't every time you log into Facebook, but it is you having to consent to Facebook collecting a whole host of data about you before you're able to download the app and have access to the app. And I'm also making the assumption, although this hasn't been verified or made clear, but I'm making the assumption that on every update, you are going to have some level of reassurance where you're reaffirming, yes, I still give consent for this app to collect this data, which I can see being a bit of a nuisance, especially since a lot of the data that Facebook collects, even though it looks like a massively long list and that it's absolutely draining all the data out possible from your phone, realistically, it's collecting data that you have already publicly given it and you are, with your actions, constantly publicly giving it. The interesting bit about this, first of all, from my perspective as a marketer, is if they do this with Facebook, is Apple then going to do this with Amazon? Are they going to do this with eBay? Are they going to do this with a whole host of other apps that track data to a similar level? I doubt it. Are they going to start doing it with any kind of Google product? For example, are they going to have the same warnings if you start using Chrome on your device? These are all kind of up in the air questions. What we do know, though, and the reason why this is such a big deal, is the vast majority of people that are on Facebook are using an Apple device to get on there. And when I say the vast majority, I'm talking about in the US and in the UK. That is, two massive markets for Facebook. And realistically, I think it's something like 80% or 70% of people that are accessing the mobile version of Facebook are accessing it on an iOS device. So it's a serious chunk of their user base that is going to be affected by this change, even though in terms of what it's actually doing, it's a click. So even though it is a nuisance, it's a nuisance that happens once every update for a click. Yeah, it's a really tough one. As you can see, I kind of swing backwards and forwards. Half of me is saying, yes, actually, it's an important thing to be able to ensure that people are consenting to data being given. The other half of me is going, well, the data they're collecting, we're not talking about collecting people's banking data. We're not talking about, collecting what people, who people are, what the private messages and that kind of thing. That's not what's being tracked. What's being tracked here is, in an anonymized way, did you visit my website that I own so I can show you an ad? Because that's a really important thing to get across here as well. It's only the website owner that can then direct those adverts to you based off of their pixel. I can't, for example, show an advert to every single person that clicks on a competitor's website because I don't have access to that data. And I never do. Even now, I don't have access to that data. Before any of these restrictions come in, I've never had access to that data. It's a tough one. I think I do actually fall on the side of Apple in this particular debate, and the fact that it's, this is my device, I bought this, I should know what data things that I'm using on it are collecting about my usage. So I kind of do fall on the side of Apple, even though it is going to cause me as a marketer, it could cause me as a marketer further difficulties in terms of being able to accurately follow and accurately track particular actions of my users that I'm using as indicators of interest for adverts. So that in a nutshell is the kind of the debate that's going on between internet privacy versus usability. That's the one way of framing it, and the other way of framing it is in terms of consent, essentially, versus kind of directive adverts. Now, directive adverts has always been an interesting position. This idea that I'm going to show you adverts that you prefer to see. Using the notion that I know that because of particular indicators of interest. I say I as in Facebook in this instance. Facebook knows that because of the indicators of interest that you're giving them, that they are most preferable. And it's not necessarily the case, because you do have poor marketers out there. You have marketers that aren't good at marketing, that use indicators of interest that don't actually indicate that you're interested at all. And so all that you end up doing is getting retargeted with adverts that are completely irrelevant to you. Wish is kind of the holy grail of that in some sense, in that their retargeting can be extremely odd in terms of any form of engagement whatsoever. Even if you comment saying, I hate this product, you will still be sucked into a retargeting campaign that pulls up their advert over and over again. So it's basically, if the quality of the marketers on the platform is really good, then the argument that says these adverts will be preferable to you and will be more relevant to you and therefore make your online experience better um, is true. It's correct, right? Provided you have good marketers that really are able to discern what you're interested in and show you that. But it's purely dependent upon that notion. And if you have if that's not going on, if it's not good marketers that are marketing to you, then in some ways the adverts can add a really detrimental effect in terms of your experience of a platform, in terms of your experience of what's going on. So whilst there is some clout in the argument of privacy and security versus essentially preferential experience, not this side of it does kind of crumble a bit because it is working on a lot of assumptions, as opposed to this side, which it is more secure if you do X, Y, and Z. It just is. So yeah, that's where the argument lies. Essentially, Apple will win this, and the reason we know Apple will win this is because Apple owns the devices. I mean, when I say owns them, I mean Apple makes them. They create them. This is an Apple computer, and there's no software changes that Facebook can implement that's going to impact the fact this is a physical Apple computer, unless Facebook starts releasing its own hardware devices in terms of laptops, in terms of mobile phones, in terms of what we call access ports or access devices. It does have Oculus, it does have Portal, but unless it starts releasing, its own equivalent of the iPhone, its own equivalent of the Mac, unless it does that far, it just won't win, and it just won't win. None of this impacts Android users. So for those of us that use the Android version on our phones, we can kind of just sit there and watch this thing happen around us without really getting too involved. Which is why I'm kind of more light about it than most marketers. But yeah, that's where that war is. That's where that debate is. So yeah, I just wanted to throw in that and kind of explain the situation and if not really explain it at all, have I? But I just wanted to show you where that consideration is happening between those two parts. If anything is unclear, or if you want any clarity on further bits of it, again, message below, comment below. I'll explain, the more in-depth bits of this. But essentially, that's the groundwork of this argument. The groundwork is about privacy versus a internet for you, essentially an internet that is customized for the user. And it's a really tough debate because whoever wins this will in some ways direct, and this might sound like a drastic statement, but the future direction that the whole internet turns in. Because people do forget the market control and the sort of access control that these companies have. Even though the internet is huge, it's a vast entity, something like 70% of the websites on it are Amazon Web Services websites. So 70% of the software bit is Amazon controlled. In terms of access ports, like I said, the vast majority of people in the US and the UK that are using smartphones are using an iOS device to access the internet. So we're talking, big swathes of the internet moving to different directions and different ports. That's why it's so important to Facebook and to all of us to kind of understand what's happening here. But I'll kind of stick my neck out and say I think Apple's going to win this one. And I think Apple will win this one because, generally speaking, as soon as you talk about data privacy, people will always be on the side of, yes, I want more data privacy, not, oh no, you can take that data privacy away, I don't care. Most people, because of what happened with stories that have like Cambridge Analytica, stories like data breaches, stories and assigning it to things like losing bank details and all of those kinds of things, and identity theft and all of that, it kind of all swims around in this same soup. So when we talk about improving data and privacy and improving data security, generally speaking, we'd always tilt on that side and away from the side that says no, let it rip, let it loose, let it free. So yeah, Apple, I'm pretty confident Apple's going to win this one. And when it does, it's going to be a really interesting thing to see how Facebook reacts to it. But it's kind of exciting at the same time. Obviously not for Facebook or particularly for Apple, but for the rest of us who don't really have much skin in the game. It is quite exciting to see how the reactions are going to be, because I think the competition will bring benefit to us as users. We will have more optionality, more, at least a higher quality or a new formulation of advertising. That's always quite exciting to be on the receiving end of, even though that sounds weird. It might just be me because I'm a marketer. But those changes, I think, will be beneficial to us either way, actually. But I do think Facebook, I do think Apple wins this one outright. All right,